Hi guys, it's Cindy the Scrapologist. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, and that way you won't miss any free tutorials on a variety of different paper crafts, junk journaling, scrapbooks, card making, and this craft show series as well that I started. So thank you for subscribing. It helps to support me being able to continue making more of these videos for all of you, including free tutorials. So the big day is here. A lot of you have been asking and really wanting to know how I did at my first ever art show. I'm going to save that for the end. I'm going to make you wait because first I did promise to tell you, show you my setup, and I'm going to show you each individual item and let you know where I purchased it and how much it cost, and show you the whole, almost a spreadsheet layout of what my first show cost me. And the links will be below to everything that I purchased. I'm putting it all down below so that if you're doing your first craft show and you don't want to do all of the work and the research into what's best, what works, what doesn't, I've already done that for you, and the links are below. So a couple of them may be affiliate links. I don't know. I don't remember where I purchased some of this stuff. Some of them may be Amazon links, and that only means that I get about 5 cents if you purchase using that link. But every little bit helps because YouTube videos do cost money to make. So that's what an affiliate link is and does. There might be a few of those there, and they'll be notated as such. It will say affiliate link next to it. So anyway, let's get going. I'm going to show you my setup, and then we'll talk about what I purchased, where I got it, how much it cost. Then I'm going to talk about what worked and what didn't work for me, because this was definitely a learning process. And then at the end I'll tell you how I did. Okay, here we go. Let me show you the show. So here we're starting at my booth, and we'll get back to this a little bit later. But you can see I have a sign and an awning and sides on my booth, which as you see down the street, you won't see a lot of other people. Nobody else had an awning that I could see, and most people didn't have their sides down. I just chose to do that to separate myself from the other vendors. And you need to decide if you want to do an indoor or an outdoor for your first one. I would probably would suggest an indoor. It scared me that we were outside. The weather can be just such you really have to worry about the weather. But they shut down the road. We were on a nice flat surface right on the pavement, which was nice. Everybody had a corner spot, which was super wonderful. And I was straight across from the musician. He was nice enough to let me photograph him here. And he was super nice. Of course, being a musician myself, we were friendly, and I was happy to see musicians out and making money again. And it was fun for the first hour, but I gotta tell you, hour 2, 3, and 4, it started to grate on me a little bit because I was trying to speak with my customers, and he wasn't being loud, but it was a little bothersome after a while. And then here we are at my booth. This was just a little table that I had with odds and ends. This rack here ended up being a fantastic thing for me, which I'll tell you about later. It had my vintage moon cards on the top and some gift cards that my girlfriend put on the bottom to kind of fill out the rack a little bit. This is an IKEA bookshelf that I think I showed in another video. It has mostly blank albums on it on display. I thought since I'm selling books, I wanted a bookshelf. A little cumbersome to travel with though. And there you can see my banner that's hanging off the back of the booth and my main table, which I showed in one of the other videos. I showed a close-up of this and all of my little display items that I used. And backing up, this is just my whole booth. My husband called it Cindy's Craft Palace because it just seemed a lot more elaborate and a lot more work than what other people had done. It was a little more extravagant and complicated, I think, than most people's booths. So the first thing I wanted to tell you about is this great rack that I found. I was looking everywhere for a metal display rack to show my journals, and my friend's cards are at the bottom there. My journals are on the top. And I wasn't able to find anything that would really accommodate something long and thin until I was walking my dog one day out back behind my house. There's an abandoned barn that used to be a retail store, a greenhouse. And I think that they used to sell seed packets in this. And so I inquired to the owner and asked if I could shoot them $5 for this, and she said, just take it. So I did. I dug it out of the mud, I cleaned it off, I painted it my shop colors, which I went with sort of a turquoise, and it worked great for my vintage journals and my friends' cards. But the main thing I wanted to tell you about this is tip number 1. On the top, I did put my my vintage junk journals with vintage moon cards on them, and everybody was talking about these, and so many people were coming over to my booth and wanting to know the story behind these cards. So tip number 1, have a conversation starter in your booth, something that is going to draw people over, that they're going to want to know more about. This was an unexpected bonus for me with those vintage moon cards. So the main thing that I wanted to help you with is to tell you about the canopy that I did end up purchasing, because this took hours and hours of research. There are so many available. They have different options, different ratings, and so if you're planning on doing a lot of shows, you might want to go with something a little more substantial like what I chose, but you certainly can get away with just a 10 by 10 canopy, and that's it. So this particular booth was $250 on Amazon, and what I liked about it is that it came with some accessories that were important to me, that met my needs, which you might not need. So first of all, it came with the awning, which you can see on the front, and it came with the side walls. I chose to have the awning so that it provided a little bit of extra sunshade. It gave me a little more room for my booth. It also gives a little bit of protection. If you do have rain, people can still stand under the awning and look at the items in your booth. So I did want the awning. You don't have to put it on. It's an option on this particular booth. You can just leave it in the bag and not set it up. It's an option. Same with the walls. Those Velcro and zipper right on. You don't even have to put the side walls on. The second thing that this came with, you see in the bottom right, there are 4 sandbags. The sandbags are very substantial with this particular canopy, and they're extremely important if you're going to be doing any outside event. At this particular event, 2 years ago, somebody's canopy went flying in the wind and hit a pottery displayer and broke all of her pottery. So you absolutely don't want something like that happening. It also came with the rolling carrying bag that you see in the bottom left hand side, which is really great. Everything fits well. I'm going to say not everything. I'll tell you about that in a minute. Most of the items fit in this rolling carry bag, and it's great. It has wheels. It has a handle on the top. There are 2 things I didn't like about this. Number 1, it fits everything except the canopy, which I don't get why they would why they would do that. So you can put the sidewalls and the awning in, and you can put the frame in, but the canopy itself, I'm going to have to go out and get a big giant laundry bag, roll it up and store it in a laundry bag because it doesn't fit in the rolling carry bag. So stupid design. The other silly thing about that is that it only opens at the top. It really needs to be a side opening zipper so that you can lay everything in there instead of having to cram it up through the top, which once you set it up, it's like, as you can see, about 5 feet tall, and it's pretty difficult to get things in there. So those are a couple of complaints about the rolling carry bag, but definitely I was glad to have it, and I was really happy with the quality of this canopy. It was very substantial, and it was easy. They say that you can do it with one person, but I have shoulder problems, and I had difficulty doing it by myself. My husband did need to help me just a little bit, but I think certainly one person without shoulder problems, I can't reach over my head and lift things. So if you don't have that problem, I think you could pretty easily erect this by yourself. So that's the main thing about the canopy that I wanted to let you know. And all of the items, like I said, that I purchased as well, in addition to the canopy, are all listed below. So here are my 6 tips for you. If you actually no 9 tips, I have 9 tips for you. If you are planning to up your game, if you're already doing craft shows and you want to up your game, or you're doing your first one, here's tip number 1. Number 1, plan months in advance. I started 3 months in advance, and that it ended up almost not being enough time for me. If you're the only person creating items for your shop in particular, and you're going to have to come up with hundreds of items just on your own, you need months and months to prepare for this. Maybe this year, start for next year would be my recommendation, and that's what I'm going to do this year. Also, unexpected things come up. I ended up having a serious illness, and that set me back months. So, you never know what's going to happen. The other unexpected thing I had was that the help that I was going to bring down with me, my girlfriend, she ended up having an injury and she couldn't come with me. So plan months in advance and expect that something is going to arise that you're going to have to deal with. Tip number 2, keep it simple, sweetheart. I overdid some aspects of my booth. My husband was calling it, as I said, Cindy's Craft Palace. I didn't really need the awning. I didn't need that expensive banner. There were a lot of things that I didn't need, and the booth setup was a little cumbersome in terms of having a bookshelf there. I, however, was happy with this, and I'm going to keep it, but you don't need to have something this elaborate. The lady that won best booth display was a lady beside me who had just a simple awning. She had children's clothing on hangers, and she rolled racks underneath the booth, and she won best booth design. So hers was about as simple as you can get, and that worked really well for her, and people seemed to like it. So you don't need something as elaborate as what I have. Tip number 3 is to have a conversation starter. As I had mentioned earlier, the vintage moon journals that I have in my shop were drawing so many people over to my booth, and we were starting conversations about it. They wanted to know more about the photos on these journals. And so if you have something that's interesting or might strike up a conversation, put it in a real prominent place so that people will come over to your booth and want to know more. Tip number 4 really helped me out a lot. Somebody that I on YouTube suggested practicing. So if you looked at my other previous video, you saw that I actually was practicing in my hallway, and I set up my main table and I tweaked it until I had everything the way I wanted it, and then I took a picture of it on my phone so that the day of the show I knew exactly where everything needed to be. The other thing I did was my husband and I practiced twice. We practiced setting up the booth in our backyard, and not only the awning and the canopy, but setting up the entire booth to see how long it would take us, because with this show we only had an hour to unload and set up, and I didn't know if that was going to be enough time. We also needed to see if all of this was going to fit in the car. So practice makes perfect. We kind of had this down like a well-oiled machine, and we had no issues tearing up and setting up and tearing down on the day of the show. Tip number 5 is just a quick tip. Stick close to home for your first couple of shows. This particular show was about an hour and, well, about 2 hours and 15 minutes from home. My plan originally was I was going to stay with my girlfriend at her father's house, but then when she fell through and couldn't help me, I had no place to stay at the last minute. So I ended up having to book accommodations in this very ritzy resort sort of area, touristy area, with only a week's notice, and I ended up paying close to $170 for one night, which is more than I even paid for the booth. So stick close to home. If you are going to be traveling, book your accommodations well in advance. One thing that you should consider is whether or not you want to do a juried versus a non-juried show. I would recommend starting out with a non-juried show. I shouldn't have done. That's one of my regrets, was I shouldn't have done a juried art show my very first time out. The main reason for that was because of the expense. It's much more expensive to do a juried show, and with this particular show, I had to donate one free item. They had a number of rules that I had to follow. For example, I wasn't allowed to display or sell any of my craft supplies, like my ephemera, only finished products, and it was $100 for the booth. So probably the reason why I chose a juried show is because I did want to display with other serious artists. I don't want to be considered a crafter. I want to be considered as a serious artist, and so I'm trying to go with a different image here. I won't be doing fall and Christmas craft fairs and things like that, but it does. I am not dissing that if that's what you want to do. If you don't do this full time as a business, then that's definitely the way I would go, is to do a non-juried craft fair over a juried art show. The next tip is in regards to taking credit cards. And I know I sound kind of snotty about this. You must take credit cards, but really in this day and age there's no reason not to. The technology that we have, they make it so easy. I ended up with a Square Reader, and with a Square Reader, you can link it with your Etsy shop. However, if you do, Etsy takes a cut, which is unfair because you're in person doing the selling. But it's so easy to just hook a little reader up to your cell phone and take credit cards. I was amazed how many people did have cash, but I would have lost out on some major sales, particularly with my larger mini albums, if I did not take a credit card. So I would do research about that and find out what works best for your phone or your tablet, and take credit cards. There's really no reason not to in this day and age. And you might lose out on a lot of sales if you don't. Okay, and then the last tip I have for you is to have some business cards made up. They're really cheap on Vistaprint. I had a bunch of cards made up, and it had all of my social media information, but I gave away a lot of cards, and these are potential future orders. One of the things that a lot of people approached me about were custom orders. They weren't ready to purchase right then and there, but they have some expensive propositions for me in terms of making wedding albums and other things that they weren't prepared to pay for on that day, nor really order, because they have some very specific needs. And I am anticipating that at least two of these are going to be getting in touch with me. So I highly recommend that you have a business card that people can, you can throw it in their bag with other things they purchased, and they will have remember you and have your name and your contact information handy. Okay, so how did I do at the show? Well, I did end up losing quite a bit of money. But you know what? I'm okay with that because this was my first show. Many of the items that I purchased, like the canopy, the banner, the business cards, the tablecloth, the bookshelf, all of that I considered to be my initial investment to be able to do future shows. So that was about maybe $400 in an initial investment, which you don't have to spend that much. That was my choice, and that's my learning. I made a few mistakes there, but and then the booth fee was 100, and that hotel fee of 170 really kicked my butt. So financially, I lost money. However, it was a wonderful learning experience. My husband and I had actually had a lot of fun. I was surprised that he had as much fun as he did. He kind of helped me out begrudgingly. He didn't complain, but it's not, crafting is not his favorite thing to do. And I took him away from work for a couple of days from his shop. So, but we ended up surprisingly having a really great time. I learned a lot, and I handed out probably 75 plus business cards. Unfortunately, nobody did well at this particular show. It was one of the first outdoor art fairs after COVID, June of 2021, and it could have gone either way. I figured it was either there were either going to be so many people there because they were so excited to be out and about and doing something, or people were still going to be scared and not come out. And I think it was the latter. Nobody at the show did as well as they did in previous years at this particular show. They usually had thousands of people, and they just didn't have that this year. So I think if things had been different, if it hadn't been just fresh after COVID, I think I actually would have made a nice profit. But I've been crafting alone in my studio for during the whole COVID thing, and it was so nice to interact with people and see how much they loved my product. And it really encouraged me, got me out of a little bit of a slump, and encouraged me to get back in here and crank out some things. So there were so many positive things that I don't consider it a loss at all. So I say go for it. Have a good attitude about your first show. Don't have a lot of high expectations. Know what your risk is, how much you're willing to lose, just in case you do. But it can be a lot of fun once you really know what you're doing and get going. So I hope that this was helpful so you don't have to do as much research as I did. All the links are below. If you have any questions about anything that I didn't cover, please send me a conversation either through my Etsy shop, Facebook, or YouTube. I always get back to every single person. And thank you for watching this craft show series. Thank you for subscribing to my channel. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.